podcast that matters.
And it is. It is. It's your podcast for all things punk, post-punk,
Goth.
new wave, grunge.
Ooh, grunge.
And Cher, because I want to do an episode on Cher.
I got Adriana texted me about that.
Yeah,
She's like, I'm all in for it. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know what you're talking about. But
I posted it on our Instagram that
did
I want to
you?
do an episode on Cher.
She has like a full outfit for it.
Perfect guest star,
Yeah.
a Leo. Before we get into our episode today, I have something exciting that I want to share with you for us. This person messaged me asking if we had like a P.O. box or what our address was for our studio. And we got this piece of mail. This is so great.
Oh my God, is that a handwritten letter?
Yes, it's handwritten on yellow legal pad. Dear Ray and Ollie, enjoyed your podcast on Iggy and the Stooges. Here's a little something to mark the occasion. I saw the Stooges many times during their heyday at the Grand Ballroom, and of course Iggy's later reincarnation at Bookies, which was the punk venue in Detroit. Look forward to your future podcast. Sincerely, Mark McCollin, with his email, and look at what we got. There's all these tickets, all these collectible tickets that he saved from over the years.
He shared them with us?
He gave them to us, and I think we should frame them and put them up.
Mark?
Isn't that so kind?
What a sweetheart.
Like, thank you for liking our
That's
podcast
really
that much.
cute.
Like, they are all different colors, so cool, with the exact date. And, like, it also says, like, who else was
what are
on
some
the
of the
bill.
other
So
bands?
Jade presents Iggy Pop and Cold Cock. Don't know who that is, but they're getting an episode. Iggy Pop.
You're sure that just didn't mean he had some ice on his balls that night?
It's just Iggy Pop's outfit that day. This one presents Iggy Pop, The Mutants,
Good
Ver, Cadillac Kids with a Z.
Oh, such a good name.
Yeah, just all these different...
Oh my God,
The
Mark.
Reruns, that's a great band name. So first of all, we should look up all of those. And some of them are repeat bands and stuff. And so maybe we can
And
split
these are
them
all
up.
from Detroit where he saw them?
It's all from Bookies, this one venue.
Mark, that is
These
amazing.
beautiful, they're so pretty.
That's so cool.
Isn't that very cool? So thank you.
What a touching gesture.
I know. Thank you, Mark. Imagine, that's so nice that someone liked our
Fuck
Stooges
yeah, dude.
episode enough to share this,
And he
memorabilia.
didn't even gatekeep at all. Like, he just shared.
Yeah, and I think we should, frame them.
I think so.
And put them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we should
Thank
split
you,
them because
Mark.
some of them are repeats, so you can take some home and we can have, each have a copy.
Really cute.
That's sweet of him. So
We're
I was-
so famous. Oh my God.
We have a fan of two particular episodes. That was so sweet. So I've been excited to share that, and I really wanted to text you all week, but I wanted to show the tickets.
No, that's
and stuff.
perfect. Yeah.
Isn't that
Did
cool?
he share how he came across the podcast or no?
No, he just messaged me. He
Love
just
that.
DM'd our podcast Instagram page
Love
asking for PO box, and I was like, I'm gonna give out this address, and hopefully.
Somebody doesn't show up.
Yeah.
Thanks for not showing up,
Thank
Mark.
you for not being a serial killer. Okay, today what are we talking about?
Oh my God, we're talking about Max's Kansas City.
A character in punk
It's
itself.
in its own right.
Technically, since we're going chronologically, Max's was open before Lou Reed started, and so this really could have been our first episode.
Yeah.
It was open in 65, but it didn't really become the punk venue that's significant to our show until Lou Reed and Iggy
And also,
everybody.
it's our fucking podcast.
Also, it's our podcast.
So sometimes
okay,
we're going to do things differently.
what if we did an episode on The Clash tomorrow, and then we just went back to
We could do it.
69
We
or
could do
70,
it.
wherever we're at? Sue us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Max's Kansas City. Opened in December 65, so really 66 by the time it took off, by Mickey Ruskin,
Yeah.
who was a scraggly-haired, gold-toothed giant,
Weirdo.
kind of a weirdo. His history is that he had opened a string of cafes and different shops where he invited artists, and he very much was doing what the beginning of Max's was, which was a lot of poets and writers.
Right.
And Max's early wave. By the way, I kept track of everyone name dropped at Max's in all the articles and books I read. Hundreds
Yeah.
of Jane Fonda and the Kennedys, and then the B-52s and Blondie were we'll get into some
Springsteen,
of
Aerosmith, the Beatles.
Tom Waits played there.
Yeah.
The Beatles were there, and
You name it from that era.
yeah, Ginsberg, famous
Yeah, right,
writers,
right.
John Waters.
Wait, was Max's in Greenwich Village? Where's Union
It
Square?
was basically across from the factory from Andy
Oh, okay.
Andy Warhol's factory. That's why Andy Warhol we'll talk about.
So convenient.
Yeah, very convenient for him. So he had opened a string of places where he really wanted it to be like where artists could be themselves, and he was trying to do the counterculture beatnik thing. He comes across Max's. He decides to open a restaurant there. He names it Max's Kansas City. Everybody thinks this is sort of random because nobody involved was named Max
Or from Kansas
or
City.
had anything to do with Kansas City. What had happened was a friend of his, when he was opening it, said all the best steaks are like Kansas City cuts. So a lot of steakhouses were called Kansas City.
Right.
And then they were like, Max's is such an approachable name. Just
Yeah.
who wouldn't want to go to Max's?
Oh, Max is making the steaks?
Yeah, Max.
I'll definitely
Yeah, let's go to
there.
Max's.
I hope he makes lobster
It's just
too.
a very likable place
Yeah.
in the Kansas City. So it's kind of random.
Wow,
It's
what
kind
a
of
boring story to
It's
first.
very. Isn't that like so not punk
Like
rock?
I was really hoping Max would be like a mob figure.
Yeah,
or
no,
something.
no. It was literally just like, who wouldn't want to go to Max's? And I'm like, I guess you're right.
Yeah.
I would totally hang out at a place
It's such a
called.
name though. Like it's the first time I heard that name, I never forgot it. You're like, oh
Yeah,
Max,
Max
like,
is a
it's
crazy
Max's
name.
Kansas City.
So, lame story. Really lame story.
I for sure thought it was a mobster.
Yeah, we could just say that. So initially, there's like, we'll get into it. There's like sort of three parts of Max's. There's like 3 eras and 3 spaces. The opening space, the first era, the first space that you would walk into is a restaurant and bar. And the sign for Max's, I ordered this poster. It said,
Yeah, why did it say steak, lobster, and then chickpeas?
okay, so steak and lobster was like to
That-
ball
those make
out,
sense,
fine
yeah.
dinner. They wanted to have like a signature
Like a vegan
snack.
option?
No, yeah.
They wanted a
For like,
signature dish.
you know, Patty Smith, whoever the fuck. I don't know if she was vegan, but she's giving vegan.
Probably was. It really seems like you
derogatory.
hate vegans.
I just
but we
think
know
it's-
you don't.
I
We
don't
know.
hate vegans. I don't want to. I don't like when people think I'm one. But not because I hate vegans.
I would never think you're a vegan, but
Thank
I guess
you.
I know you pretty well.
Yeah. So steak and lobster were like fine dining, ball out, sort of a bougie atmosphere. It was like all red. It was like low lit,
Yeah.
like red tablecloths.
Classic
like very,
steakhouse.
Very cool steakhouse. They wanted a signature snack, and there's other places around that had signature snacks that were like made sense. They
Yeah.
just went with chickpeas.
Yeah.
And then often in the back room, there would be like chickpea
Bowls.
food fights.
Bowls of chickpeas,
Bowls of
like
chickpeas,
bar snacks.
But like, by the way, dried out stale chickpeas,
Yeah.
like not being replenished
that somebody
nightly.
had just like shot heroin and touched their balls and then grabbed some.
Yeah.
And they were like throwing them at each other.
So that's why chickpeas. They just wanted a
Weird.
signature snack.
But then just to like throw it up, it like takes up most of the sign.
Yeah. It's like a third of what they serve. So Mickey was always inviting artists, and he wanted it to be a safe space for artists to do what they wanted and be themselves. And initially he was looking for more of like a poet and sculptor and painter crowd. Obviously, by letting people let their freak flags fly and being a place where artists didn't have money, they could still enjoy themselves and ring up a tab. Obviously, this is eventually going to invite punks. But the first era,
Just the lowest down.
just
Yeah.
the Bridge and Tunnel crowd is
because
gonna
there was
show
free
up.
food during happy hour.
Yeah. Mickey said of every venue he ever opened, but especially at Max's, this was his living room and there was a party every night.
Yeah.
So he didn't treat it like this formal restaurant or this formal venue. He's like, these are my friends. If you're weird, you're welcome. It took a lot to get kicked out. He's like, this is a house party. This is my living room. I'm having a house party every night. And even if you got kicked out, like a week later, everyone forgot about it and you were right back in.
Right.
It was just, there were people at the door, but there weren't really bouncers.
Right.
And then a really funny rule he had was there's no suits and ties.
I love
so
that.
like Warren Beatty showed up one time in like the prime of his fame probably, and they're like, you have to go home and go back to your hotel and
And, like,
change.
Wear something
And then
weird.
he came back and he still looked too straight, and they were like, sorry, it's couples night. And send him away again. And then one night there was two guys who also seemed a little too straight. They weren't weird enough. And they
Fucking
were
cops, man.
they were like, I think just like investors who are just people who are trying to get in and be cool. Like these Wall Street guys
Yeah,
were
but,
trying
like,
to get
fuck
in.
that. I'm glad
And
that they were, like-
they were getting rejected at
Yeah.
the door, and Mickey worked the door a lot. And behind them in line was Mickey's wife
Mm-hmm.
and her friend, and he's like, "Sorry, you guys, it's couples night," and they just go like, "Oh, we're with them." And Mickey knows
Yeah.
they're lying, but he thought it was so funny that
Then
he
he's
let
just
them
like,
in.
"Right, yeah, that's
yeah,
cool."
he's like, that was really clever.
Touche.
You guys get in here.
Yeah.
So he initially would let people trade art for bar tabs.
Right.
He would let you eat for free if you would play a show that night. Like, he
It's really
spent
cute, actually.
thousands of dollars feeding like starving artists. At one point, Lou Reed was like, if he didn't feed me for free, I would have starved. And I'm thinking this is like 3-month, 6-month period. Lou Reed's like, 3 years of my life, that's the only place I ate. Like
Yeah.
for 3 years, that was the only place I could afford was free.
Yeah.
And Mickey Ruskin kept me
Meanwhile, he's
alive.
buying like copious amounts of amphetamine.
He had a
and
lot of
heroin.
money. Yeah. He was spending a lot of money
So,
on
like, he-
other
he
things.
would've been all right
Yeah,
if
he would have been fine. He had to
But
make
we've
different
all been
choices. Yeah,
all
I
been there.
also don't eat sometimes. So early on, first it's a restaurant. It's not really taking off. It's across the street from the factory. Andy Warhol. If there's ever been an appropriate use for the word entourage,
Yeah. it was
Andy
definitely him.
Warhol had an entourage.
Yeah.
And he's bringing in Edie Sedgwick, Nico, like models,
Yeah.
other artists, other painters. He's going into the back room. So there's the restaurant that's like not popping off yet. It will be. Eventually that's where going to be the politicians and the record label guys.
That's where the Kennedys are.
And yeah. Some of the actors. The back room, Andy Warhol takes over this specific round table. It's his table with his 5, 10, 15 people he's got at any given time with him. This becomes a hot spot. This becomes what starts drawing. Like, once you get the artists, then you get the models. Once you get the models, you get the photographers. Once you get the photographers, you get the magazines and the record, like all these
Yeah.
people. And it took off. So Mickey's
And
very
the musicians
smooth.
are attracted because there's drugs involved.
There's drugs and
Yeah.
alcohol and food, and it becomes like copious, like so many drugs. You could walk back there and just die from like
Yeah.
how like it's crazy.
People
to
were
eat
like
alive.
shooting amphetamines in their ass on the table.
Lou
like,
Reed
all kinds
said
of crazy
there
shit.
was drugs that weren't illegal yet because they were too new to have
Right.
made it across anyone's desk. So Mickey Ruskin, it seems silly. He would have like an $8,000 tab for an artist. Seems silly, but by getting their work on the walls, by getting them to be there, they're bringing in the people who do have
Who do
money.
pay.
And it didn't pay off right away, but it did work. And the next thing you know, by the end of the 60s, Max's is the hot spot
Right.
in town. It's where everyone, I mean, like Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
like every big writer, every big director, everybody.
And the music, correct me if I'm wrong, but the music that they're booking at this time is blues acts, people like Bruce Springsteen and Aerosmith.
We're doing a lot of acoustic
Okay.
sets,
So
like
we're
Tom
not
Waits
even there
acoustic.
to the rock and roll yet?
In like the 66, 67, we're doing Springsteen and Dylan and Patti Smith
Okay.
before it was the band when Patti Smith was solo. I guess.
Just the worst.
I wouldn't. I booked her. But that's just me.
Yeah.
No hate. You know what I mean? Lovely girl,
Yeah.
by all accounts.
Super handsome boyfriend.
Boyfriend, Robert Mapplethorpe, one of the most famous photographers to frequent that scene.
Right.
Then by 68 maybe, we're getting Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground.
Starting to hang out there.
69, Iggy Pop, Bowie. If you
Right,
want
right.
history on the late 60s at Max's, I would just say listen to
Back
our
to
Iggy and Lou Reed
yeah.
episodes because we cover that era of what's going on in punk. When Max's becomes very relevant to like our podcast for the sake of what we're doing is like from 70 to 75 and then 75 to 81, there's like two distinct
Right.
chapters where it becomes more punk rock.
Right.
This is when the back room becomes like by 70, the back room is like people are like fucking on the floor.
Yeah.
It's so dark in there, your eyes have to adjust. Everything's red neon lights, like every drug out on the table, people just hooking up everywhere, like just different art by all different people on different walls being sold. One time, Andy Warhol paid a $700 tab with a single piece of art that he gave. It's just like, it's becoming just this like free for all.
Yeah.
It's becoming this very wild place.
But Mickey Ruskin, right, is like, he loves weirdos, right? For lack of a better word. Like, he likes to be surrounded by interesting people. So he's fine with all this. Like,
Yeah.
he's okay with the debauchery because it means that he's having these interesting people in his restaurant.
So
right?
he would. Max's is described like there's so many good descriptions. One of the descriptions of Max's is just that it was lightning in a bottle. It's like it could never be replicated. There's nothing before it. There was nothing else going on like it at the time. There's nothing else that's been after. You cannot ever recreate Max. It was just magic. It was magnetic. Like it didn't really. People were drawn to it, which is
Right.
why you get such a variety of people. people talk about it as being this like phenomenon.
Well, it's like
And-
like when you talk about New York Underground in the 70s, like they're talking about Max's Kansas City. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is the birthplace of where art meets the punk
Well,
ethos.
and this is the argument. Some people will say that punk was born at CBGB, but
Max's was first.
Max's was there quite a few years earlier. Iggy Pop played there before CBGB, before Hilly Crystal opened.
Yeah.
So I would say, I mean, we've already talked about we think punk was birthed in Michigan, but in New York, it's going to be Max's.
Right. That's where Iggy and Lou Reed and Bowie meet.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where that all
Yeah.
starts. So.
And then by the time they're taking over, like Warhol isn't really into this
No.
scene as much. He's too much of a snob for punk rock. Like
I just think
I feel like he's not real.
I think that he just doesn't like the ethos, but like I think he likes cleaner,
yeah,
stricter,
he's pop art.
more traditional,
Yeah,
like guidelines of life. You know what
yeah,
I mean? I
he's
don't think that-
bougie.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so he doesn't want to see like somebody shooting up their.
I
shooting
don't
it up
think
in their
so,
ass
yeah,
On the table
yeah.
And, like, fucking in the bathroom. And,
yeah. I don't think that's his
Yeah.
scene. He sort of moves on, which is fine because it makes room for this whole
Oh,
new
thank
crowd.
God, yeah.
Yeah, I'm much more into it. Lou Reed's is like, oh yeah, this is where the careers of people who were bound to be famous or were bound to end their lives by using drugs all came together. Like you could walk in the room in your life, like people were like, everyone in this room is going to be famous.
Mm-hmm.
You could go into the back room on any night and people will say like, even the biggest asshole in the room was like destined to be famous. And it's true. There's 200 famous people that you could just rattle off at the top of your head that were regulars at Max's.
I mean, somebody said I don't remember who said this, but one of the things that really stuck out to me was like you had people like Jane Fonda coming in because she wanted to rub elbows with junkies. Like this is like something that was desirable to them. They're like, you know, they wanted to be close to this underground world without getting into it too much, and Max's was a place
Right,
that-
a little exposure. A lot of
Yeah.
it was like to see and be seen too. A lot of it was like the Page Six vibes
Yeah,
where
yeah.
you just wanted.
which is so funny to think about. That's
Yeah.
the Page Six vibes.
Yeah.
not like the Met Gala.
It's so funny because there was an era in Providence where like everything was underground, and I was going to a lot of really cool shows. There'd be free shows a night at like different warehouses that were all
Yeah.
like illegal venues, and none of the people walking straight around town wanted to rub elbows with that scene.
Yeah, of course not. But this
It
was
wasn't
new at the
bougie,
time.
yeah.
It was like, yeah, I think it was just like it seemed
Well-
dangerous and fun,
Yeah,
and it was still dangerous and fun, and not just dangerous and scary.
yeah, you're right. It was a different time.
Yeah.
Well, drugs weren't like laced with a million things too, and
Yeah.
their coke was definitely way better than.
So much better.
Yeah, kind of jealous. Another writer poet that frequented it early on was William Burroughs, and he said this was the intersection of everything.
Okay.
This is where pop art met pop life. This was where fine art met debauchery. This was the intersection of like all of the culture going on, all of the people in New York City. You could find it all, and like what it became by combining all of these different things was this unique thing at Max's. He said it was the intersection of every walk of life and every type of art. Because you have these like directors that are, I mean, like John Waters, who's doing a little bit more high profile but very weird stuff, like rubbing elbows with Robert Mapplethorpe, who's like living in a studio with no furniture yet. Like you really do have such a variety. And it was just where culture lived. It was like a living organism. It just there was a counterculture that existed from combining all these different cultures that just thrived there. And it was a home for it.
I mean, it really is like a one of a kind. Like, there's really nothing else that's.
We're
ever
never
happened.
gonna like experience a Max's. I couldn't tell
I'm like
you
a
any.
little sad right now. about
I know, and we don't have a lot going on venue wise in Providence right now. That's it's a little bit dry out there at this
it. Yeah.
point in time, and I've just never had a Max's.
Should we open a music venue?
Probably, I've thought about doing this a lot.
We have so many things to do in our
We
lives.
do. We have a show to write. We're writing a show.
Not a big deal.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. We're just gonna sell it to HBO. Also, this is when you're gonna start getting. I don't really think we should probably still be calling them this to this day. I don't have a new word for it, but there are gonna be episodes on groupies, famous
Okay.
groupies.
We have to come up with a word for
We
it.
have to like. Yeah, I feel like that's derogatory. It's just outdated. I don't think it has like a good connotation. I don't know what else we call them though. We'll invent a new word.
Okay.
We'll get back to everybody on that.
I mean, I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem derogatory to me. Is that something that you are just gut feeling, or is that something you?
I
have
feel
heard?
like the connotation of the word groupie is like
Sleeping with a band member.
sleeping in the bed and just being like so
Ditzy
yeah, just being sort of like a follower and just I don't think it's like a particularly
So
like
how do we imply or like get across that they were like also the muses and like
yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah, we should just call them muses.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. This is where you're going to start seeing that there's girls who are following Iggy to New York from California. There's like you're going to start getting that. You're going to start getting go-go dancers as like disco becomes a thing.
Right,
You're
'cause
getting all
disco
these
was
dancers at Max's. So, while it's still Mickey Ruskin, there's a story I read that there would be like fires, like actual fires or like bomb threats, and everyone would like run outside of the building, and then as soon as the firemen or police came out, they're just like, I'll go right back in.
Yeah.
There'd be like a bomb threat, and they'd be like,
Yeah.
clear out the place, and it'd be like, all right, it's
we're
been
good.
15 minutes, there's
Yeah, I
no
think we're
bomb
good.
going off,
Yeah.
and everyone just go because they're just like, we have partying to do. Like
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
partying right
Yeah.
now. Like when you need another line or
don't really
whatever.
care.
Like yeah, you're like,
I could die tonight. Who gives a fuck? Yeah.
I gotta get back in there. Like
Yeah.
that's where the party's at. Like
I've
what are we
definitely
doing?
been there. Who
Standing
fucking
around on the
cares if we
side.
die?
Yeah, and that was like, I don't think it happened a lot, but when I read this story, it was definitely stated as multiple fires and multiple bomb threats. I'm not saying it happened once a week, but it didn't happen one time.
Yeah, it happens enough times.
Enough times
To warrant
that it
a
was
story.
plural
Yeah,
bomb
yeah.
threats.
Who's calling in bomb threats to Max's?
To Max's Kansas
Like,
City.
There's a bomb
By
in
the
the
way,
middle
in
of
like
Max's.
1970,
Yeah,
like-
but this is before terrorism was a huge
yeah, ahead of their time.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Also just part of the counterculture, I guess.
I guess.
Who the fuck knows?
I don't know. We'll look into that.
So at a certain point, all of these tabs that are unpaid and other bills start to catch up to him. I mean, unfortunately, like since it's a party in his living room every night, he maybe didn't run it like a business quite as much as he should have. You know what I mean? Like here he is with all of these unpaid tabs from artists,
Yeah.
these unpaid vendors. You know, he's not paying his bills. So one day he locks the door and he just kind of takes off.
And he takes off.
There's
and
no,
it's
there
closed
doesn't
for.
file for bankruptcy. Doesn't do any
Is
of
it
that
closed for
stuff.
like a whole year? It's closed for.
A while.
I mean, at least 6 months. I think maybe a year. There's no Max's.
Yeah.
It's reopened under the same name. The restaurant is the same.
Right.
The back room is the same by Tommy Dean.
So I have this thing where Tommy Dean's in Paris. He'd been to Max's a lot when it was open before. So he's in Paris and he hears that it's closed and he goes, well, he talks to his lawyer. He's like, what do I have to do to get this place? And the lawyer looks into it and he's like, there's one lien on this building.
Yeah.
And it's a $3,500 electric bill. And if you pay that, it's yours. And then now he had this whole
Mickey
turnkey.
one time, I forget who it was. He's like, hey, if you start playing shows here, I'll just right off the bat give you an $8,000 credit.
Right.
He didn't even let them ring up the tab. He
Right.
said you have an $8,000 credit.
Right.
Like, go nuts.
Right.
And people were eating steak and lobster for free.
And
And
chickpeas.
champagne. And chickpeas.
chickpeas.
Which is what really did it, probably.
The cheapest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he was trying to offset the steak and lobster.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
chickpeas.
Tommy and Laura, is it Laura Dean? Is his wife?
Yes.
Tommy and Laura Dean buy it, yeah. That's in 1975, right?
Yeah, I think by the time they reopen, I know that 75 is when Peter Crowley takes over. So
Oh, okay.
Tommy Dean opens
But I think
it.
he comes in like pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly,
Yeah.
Peter Crowley comes over. This is where we get to the third wave. Our first wave is Andy Warhol. Second wave is like
the juicy stuff.
yeah. This is where it becomes very
It
punk
hasn't
rock.
been juicy enough yet.
No. The third wave is when we get past Iggy Pop and Lou Reed and Bowie, and now Peter Crowley comes in. He's booking the Cramps, the Ramones, Blondie, who Debbie Harry of Blondie worked there
a
as a
waitress.
waitress. Terrible waitress. Dropped
Yeah.
burgers on the floor. Was always stoned.
I mean, when you're that pretty.
Kind of didn't engage with anybody. I also would be bad at my job if I looked like Debbie Harry.
And also, she was there to get signed. She was there to to get
Yeah, she was
famous.
hustling. Yeah. She felt like a little bit of a fly on the wall. She was like 24. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
she's super young. And she'd
pretty
been a
young.
Playboy bunny already.
Yes.
But now she was like just super into the being a musician, and she had this band, right? She had the band by this point.
She had Blondie.
But
I
they
don't know
weren't
that it
signed
was the
yet.
full lineup yet. I think it was Chris
Just her and
Stein at
Chris,
least.
yeah.
We'll get to that in our Blondie episode.
Yeah.
Jonathan
Oh, don't worry,
Richman-
we'll do a Blondie episode.
Blondie episode. It's going to be a 4-parter. Yeah, we have a lot to. It's just one episode is just us drooling
talking
for an
about-
hour. Just thinking about her quietly.
Just looking at
to
pictures of
ourselves.
Debbie Harry and
Like,
going,
have
oh,
you
look at
seen
that
this
one.
I thought about printing out a bunch of like pictures of Debbie Harry and just being like, this is
Like cue cards.
yeah, I have a lot of photos of her saved. It takes
Ugh,
up a lot of
yeah,
space
me
on my
too.
computer.
So who else? So Debbie Harry works as a waitress. Who else? We should do this
Early
right now.
on, when he's very young, Jonathan Richman is a
Oh my
busser
God.
there.
Jonathan Richman, who is just the most endearing fucking human
The
being.
biggest fan of the Velvet Underground of
Yeah.
all time.
And
Gets
just
to
the
be a
sweetest,
busser
man.
there, like
Yeah.
probably after they had played their last show, but Lou Reed was still around
Right.
doing his solo career and
Right.
fucking around. So like Jonathan Richman probably bust Lou Reed's table, who was his hero.
And Jonathan Richman went on to start the Modern Lovers.
The
for
Modern
those who
Lovers,
don't
which
know,
gets
yeah.
an episode for
Yeah.
sure.
Also, with Joey Ramone, right? He worked there.
Oh yeah, I didn't know this until you told me.
He was a dishwasher.
Joey Ramone, which he was probably such a bad dishwasher. I can't imagine him having.
I mean, dude, you can get really stoned and wash dishes, and
that's
it's fine.
true. I just can't imagine him having work ethic for any kind of typical job.
But you can kind of just like,
Phone it in.
yeah.
Yeah, he was
spray.
probably just taking drugs and having the time of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably if you take speed, you can probably be a good dishwasher.
Oh, I can vouch for that.
I know you can.
So I just love the idea of like, you know, in my head they all work together at the same time, and they're like out back in the alley,
If
like
not,
sharing a joint.
that's what we're gonna write.
We're going to show about it.
Yeah.
But I just love that like they're in the back alley sharing a joint, and Debbie and Joey are like,
And
busy
there's
night.
an overlap where like this third wave starts and Peter Crowley starts booking all these punk bands that are talking heads. Like
Yeah.
I can't even go on to name every famous band.
So he was booking at a venue called Mother.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't working. Like he's booking these same bands at a venue
Yeah,
called
and
Mother,
it's not taking
and
off.
it's not working. And
Because
then
it's just not the lightning in the bottle
right,
that Max's is. It's
and
not
Tommy
the hot
Dean
spot.
is booking like shoot, who's the blues guy? Lightning Hopkins, is that right?
I don't know.
Tommy Dean is booking not punk rock bands originally. He's booking like blues artists and stuff, and that's not working either.
Well, Tommy Dean, when he took it over, it was like disco was taking off.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And
so
he
they're trying to
wanted
book
it
disco
to be
too,
a
and-
disco venue,
and-
on Friday and
yeah.
Saturday it's disco, and then the rest of the week, Peter Crowley. I mean, he's booking the B-52s.
Right.
Like, he's booking
So
all
he
these
comes
people
over really quickly from Mother and is booking all these people.
and booking all these bands. And Max's is the right venue for it, but like Tommy Dean doesn't realize what he has here yet. And then all of a sudden, they're selling more tickets to Talking Heads on a Monday night than they are to the disco
Friday
on a
night
Friday.
disco.
So eventually, he gets to take over more. There was another woman who started doing the booking.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Peter Crowley went to London for a while,
Yeah.
and while he was gone, Tommy Dean hired somebody else to do the booking, and she was doing a really good job, so he didn't want to just fire her. So when Tommy Dean came back, they split the schedule.
I love that.
And every other day they got to book, which
So
would turn
cute.
out like everyone got a Saturday, and then the next week you got Sunday.
And for a while, Peter
alternated.
Crowley was trying to book national acts as well.
Yeah.
I can't think of examples, but he's trying to bring in these national acts, and that's not doing as well as
No.
the Talking Heads are
Yeah.
and Blondie. So
Yeah.
now he's just booking
And
local
this is
local
where
bands.
there's this overlap where the Sex Pistols played.
Mm-hmm.
Every solo show that Sid Vicious played in the U.S. was at Max's. That's where Sid Vicious
seven
last.
of them.
So all 7 of them over the course of like 4 days. That was the last time Sid Vicious ever played live.
Yeah.
The last Velvet Underground show ever
Yeah.
happened there. There's a lot of iconic.
I think it was the last New York Dolls show too, or am I wrong about that?
I'm not sure, but like likely, sure, yeah.
So there was this whole. I guess we can talk about this really quickly. Like Johnny Thunders, right, who was in the New York Dolls, and then he went on to do the Heartbreakers, which is
Yeah.
just
Can't wait for
we
that
fucking
episode.
love him.
Yeah.
Johnny Thunders is the notorious fucking junkie,
Yes.
and he had this sort of thing where he would get an advance from Tommy Dean for the show next week, spend that all on drugs, sell his guitar for more drugs, sell his amp for more drugs. He'd show up for the show on Friday and be like, I gotta go get my guitar from the pawn shop. Can I have some more money?
That's so funny.
And Tommy Dean is like, well, I need the fucking show to happen, so
You know, like,
go buy your
yeah,
guitar
go
back.
buy your. What am
He
I
would
gonna
probably
do?
go buy drugs one more time, and then
Yeah,
like,
and then come back. He'd be like, they wouldn't give me the amp.
So like Johnny Thunders becomes this sort of like junkie punk hero, and
Yeah.
people are literally going to see the Heartbreakers shows to see if like he'll die on stage. This is the one where he'll die on stage.
And the New York Dolls, like all notorious drug users
Yeah.
too, and the same thing. Like half of it was just, could they function tonight? Like
Yeah.
it was the thrill of like the risk going
Yeah.
on in that culture.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But Johnny Thunders, to his credit, like despite all his drug use, like he was like good at he was a good like he knew how to make a band happen. I will give him that. It wasn't like he didn't show up for his gigs. He always showed up for
No,
him. He just didn't have his
there's
fucking
so
instruments
many
with him.
instances of these punks that were like all consumed by drugs,
Hardworking.
except it didn't get in the way of the music.
Yeah, they're
I guess
really
you just
hardworking.
love what you're doing
Yeah,
that much.
yeah. And the Heartbreakers were great, man.
Yeah, they were
one
great.
of the greatest bands ever.
Yeah, one of the most iconic bands at Max's. I have a funny story from David Bowie.
Okay.
He said, like, often there would be nights where, I don't know, they'd just been drinking and maybe doing less speed and it was a little mellow. And Lou
A little bit
Reed,
less speed.
yeah, probably more heroin that
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
Lou Reed, Bowie, and Iggy would just be sitting around the table, like, just admiring each other's makeup. Like, they were all really into
Like,
drag.
"Which
and
eyeliner
they
are
would
you
just
using
be-
tonight?"
Yeah, they'd just be, like, enjoying their drag and
It's
checking
really
each
cute.
other's makeup out.
Speaking of drag, I think it's time to talk about a really notorious
Yes.
character.
Yeah, that comes around.
Can you kind of give an intro on this person because you know a little bit more about their background?
So Jane County comes from, I forget, a southern state. We'll do a joke. Jane County.
She has like a maybe Alabama accent or something.
Yeah, Jane County gets an episode
Yeah.
very soon.
Yeah.
Probably right after the Dolls or around the time of our Dolls episode. Originally, the band was Wayne County because Jane County came from Wayne County.
Mm-hmm.
Does drag, eventually comes out as transgender, goes by Jane County, spelt like Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
Has a band, is like, the Dolls get a lot of credit for being the first drag band. Jane County, I don't know why she's not a household name. She was the most punk person
For real.
ever.
Yeah.
She was doing like grotesque, super sexual things on stage. She was making crazy music. She was living the punk lifestyle. She was doing drag before the Dolls, who get credit for it. She was one of the first openly transgender people. Super punk, outrageous, fearless
Yeah.
character.
Yeah. You and I weren't. I mean, you knew of her more than I did, but I didn't really know anything about her.
But
until
I
recently.
knew of her from reading other book, like the
Right.
book about the Dolls.
Right.
Not because I've ever found a book. I mean,
But you and I, being huge fans of punk rock until recently, didn't really know about her, right?
yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't learn about her until about a year ago when I was
Right.
reading a Dolls book.
Which is kind of tragic that she's so underrated and
Yeah.
unknown.
But now
But we got
we're
some
gonna
stories
do-
about her
We're gonna
tonight.
do a great episode on her before too long too.
I have
but
a
you
couple
have some
of
Max's.
juicy. I have some
you have
juicy
some Max's stories.
One of the biggest things. So Max's, Kansas City, and CBGB are the punk clubs in New York City, right? And CBGB often gets credit for being the first club. Max's was actually first.
yes.
The story of CBGB being discovered that I've always heard is that television was just walking by when Hilly was like changing the sign, and they were like, "Oh, what, can we play here?" And like that's how it started.
Okay. Yeah.
Jane County's like, "Fuck that! I was the one who
Yeah.
talked to Hilly."
Yes.
Jane County's the connection between Max's and CBGB,
Yes.
so she was kind of playing both clubs for a while.
yeah.
One night she's playing CBGB, and Handsome Dick Manitoba, who is in the band The Dictators, who do have some pretty good songs. Apparently he's a homophobic piece of shit, an asshole, and is like saying all these slurs to her on stage.
Oh my God.
So he goes up. I guess to get to the bathroom, you had to walk across the stage.
Yes.
Which is, yeah.
CBGB,
At CBGB,
was
yeah.
so not a venue.
Yeah,
It was
right.
a bar.
Right.
It's like the News Cafe in Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Totally, yeah,
Where
yeah.
it's like, it's not even just a dive bar. Like, it's just why are you doing shows here?
Yeah.
It just logistically, there's no
A lot
stage.
of people said that that Hilly never really appreciated the punk. It fell into his lap, and he
Yes.
just didn't know what to do with it.
No, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
He undervalued it. Meanwhile, it's the only reason
And
we know
Tommy
your
Dean,
name.
on the other hand, is
Tommy Dean
embracing
knows.
it. And so CBGB is not so much a venue; it's just a bar. So Handsome Dick Manitoba is saying all the shit to her, and then he gets up on stage to go to the bathroom. Jane County thinks he's getting up on stage to fight her, so she fucking knocks him with a mic
I
stand.
did know this story. Yes, she could have
Knocks him
killed
down
him.
with a mic stand, and then now he gets up and they're starting to fight.
Yeah,
But she ends up pinning him down and beating the shit out of
yeah.
him.
By all accounts, she could have killed him.
Yeah.
Over the head with the mic stand by beating him down. It's actually she's so lucky she didn't go to jail for this.
Because she really hurt him.
Yeah, because she's punk as fuck.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, if you're gonna be transphobic or homophobic,
Yeah.
I'm gonna kick your ass too.
Yeah.
That's
So after that, she was only in Max's Kansas City. They only played there, and they didn't play at CBGB's anymore.
So I heard a different story that's super petty and way
Okay.
less eventful. I heard that Hilly Crystal had booked Jane County, and then she blew off the show and didn't show up, and he was just so butthurt that he wouldn't book her after that.
that was probably his version of it.
That's definitely a boring story.
That's definitely a white man's
I
version
also
of it.
heard from Iggy Pop, anyone who said that they weren't fucking and doing drugs and fighting or all of the above is just trying to cover up their now respectable ass.
Right.
So if that's Hilly Crystal's version, like, we know. And by the way, by the time we get this third wave, Tommy Dean, the upstairs, we've talked about the restaurant. There's the back room that was like the glam spot where the drugs were happening, where people were fucking, where Andy Warhol made it famous. Now upstairs is where the venue is. Now Peter Crowley is like, we have to put a separate bar upstairs.
Right.
We have to make this not just a room where people play, but a venue. And this is what stops it from just being like a stage to being a venue. And at first they could only fit 90 people up there, which is why people would play 2 shows a night for 4 nights in a row, because we could only get 90 people in there.
The New York Dolls sold out 6 nights in a row of 2 shows or something like that.
The Velvet Underground was playing 5 nights a week at one point in their days. Anyway.
That's cool.
And by the way, by the time we get this third wave, Tommy Dean, the upstairs, we've talked about the restaurant. There's the back room that was like the glam spot where the drugs were happening, where people were fucking, where Andy Warhol made it famous. Now upstairs is where the venue is. Now Peter Crowley is like, we have to put a separate bar upstairs. We have to make this not just a room where people play, but a venue. And this is what stops it from just being like a stage to being a venue. And at first they could only fit 90 people up there, which is why people would play 2 shows a night for 4 nights in a row, because we could only get 90 people in there.
The New York Dolls sold out 6 nights in a row of 2 shows or something like that.
The Velvet Underground was playing 5 nights a week at one point in their days. Anyway.
That's cool.
That's when it became, I can edit this into place, but
I'm not worried about it.
That's when it became, it was because of Peter Crowley that it went from just being sort of this upstairs space to being
a venue.
A punk venue.
With like a good sound system and everything.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, with its own bar. That's when it became, it was because of Peter Crowley that it went from just being sort of this upstairs space to being
a venue.
A punk venue.
With like a good sound system and everything.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, with its own bar.
One of the other bands that was huge at Max's Kansas City we haven't mentioned yet is the Ramones. Right?
Yes. Which they were
played
huge.
At both.
They were huge at CBGB, and they were one of the staples at CBGBs. Like, they were,
yeah.
That was more home base of them.
I think Talking Heads and the Ramones were more CBGB.
Yeah, and Blondie, too, was probably 50-50. Yeah. Blondie was both.
Some bands were both.
The Ramones take credit for being the first punk band at CBGB. But again, Wayne County was there before the Ramones. But the Ramones take credit for being, like, the band of CBGB.
I mean, they're definitely a bigger name.
They're a bigger name, but not first.
Not first?
Yeah.
Not first.
Jane County's episode is going to be
County.
so punk.
So the Ramones are playing a lot at both Max's and CBGB's. They're not like that much of a druggy band, but Dee Dee Ramone, kind of in particular, has got a little bit of a habit.
Yeah, Dee Dee's my favorite Ramone.
Yeah,
he's the
bass
bassist
player.
and the baby boy.
Dee Dee Ramone used to go up to 53rd and 3rd, and they called it the Loop.
Which is a great Ramone song.
Yeah.
53rd and 3rd.
And 53rd and 3rd was the place where male prostitutes went to get money. Dee Dee Ramone was known to go up there to get money for drugs.
Yes.
So he would prostitute himself. He had this crazy girlfriend called Crazy Connie.
Yes. Connie
who tried
probably
to cut
gets
off
an episode.
Arthur Kane's thumb, who was the bass player for New York Dolls.
For New York Dolls, yeah.
And then now she's dating Dee Dee Ramone. Like, the hell are you doing?
She dated a couple people,
Yeah.
and she was like the cliche of the batshit crazy girlfriend that I wish women did. But
Sounds like she was actually crazy because she
she
tried
was
to
crazy.
cut off. Also tried to cut off Dee Dee
she
Ramone's
just
dick.
fight anyone who looked at her boyfriends, and
Yeah.
she dated a couple guys in the scenes. If you just like looked at Dee Dee,
Yeah.
she was gonna kill you.
But
like,
she caught him with a trick.
yeah, a
She
trick.
fucking tried to cut his dick off.
Yes,
In
she's
the bathroom at Max's.
an incredibly violent person.
Yeah. And then so Dee Dee Ramone comes out of the bathroom and Jane County's standing there and he's like, Jane, look at my dick.
Oh my god!
Like, look what she did.
Did she to actually have some success?
She cut him. She didn't cut it off.
Right,
She
but
got some cuts
okay,
in.
Lorena Bobbitt.
And then immediately after this is happening, he's like, look at my dick, it's all
Yeah.
cut. He's like, oh my God, Jane, your tits are growing. They look great. Like, this is like the same interaction, which I think is so cute because she just had this awful experience with fucking Dick Manitoba. And then Dee Dee Ramone's like, your tits are looking really
You're looking
nice.
really
He's like, don't let them
beautiful.
get too big. They look really nice the way they are.
That's so
I
funny.
know, I really like that. So that's another reason to love Dee Dee.
Yeah, he's such baby boy.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's so defenseless. Of course, he would end up with a very dominant woman.
Yeah.
because he's so soft.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
But also there was one more thing, this is the last thing about Jane County. During her transition, she is growing boobs like Dee Dee's noticing. She runs into Patti Smith on the street in the same era, and Patti Smith is like, hey, Jane. And then she's like, oh, you're growing boobs? And totally gets weirded out.
Patti Smith?
Yeah.
Okay, the only thing I liked about her before was her personality, and there goes that.
I mean, to be fair,
Patti
like,
Smith, transphobe, you heard it here first.
yeah, like kind of though, right?
Yeah.
And this is coming directly from, I saw it from Jane's mouth. Like she said it on the interview. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really fucked.
That is really fucked.
Another check mark in the no column for Patty.
Yeah, the only thing I liked were her memoirs and just her as a character, but if your character is going to suck,
Yeah.
honestly, I'm going to stop buying your books.
That's going to hurt her a lot.
I already own all of them. So I have a story about Joey Ramone. So I saw a Peter Crowley interview, and he said Punk Magazine came out, and they didn't mean to name anything punk. And like, we're gonna do an episode, maybe a mini episode, on everyone who claims to have started the word punk, because there's
Which
a
is
lot,
a lot
of
of people.
claims. But Punk Magazine came out, and they claim they named it, but they weren't intending to name that the genre. And it caught on, and people just started calling this music and this scene punk. And the people we know as punk today didn't like, Iggy didn't like
They
being
thought they
called
were rock and
punk.
roll,
Like,
yeah.
it was like offensive to them.
Yeah.
So the first issue of Punk Magazine comes out, and Joey Ramone marches up to Peter Crowley. He's like, "They called us punk. Let's kick their asses." And Peter Crowley's like, "Who, the publication? Like, you want to
Yeah.
go over to the publication office and
Punch
kick
the
their
reporter.
asses?
Yeah.
Like, whose asses do you want to kick? The people writing
Yeah.
in magazines, not
He's
even
like,
Punk
"Fucking all of 'em.
Magazine."
Let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Well, he's like, "Let's go. Let's kill these people." And Peter
This
Crowley's
is
like,
Joey or Johnny?
Joey Ramone.
Well, I can't picture him
I
being
know,
that,
because
like,
he's normally just so
doesn't really say
No,
much.
it sounds like a Johnny story.
It sounds like a Johnny story.
When we get to our Ramones episode,
It's
I would
most-
like
yeah.
if I had told you a story and be like, guess what Ramone it was
It's
about?
a fun game to play.
Yeah, we should do that
Yeah.
for Ramones episode.
Yeah.
That would be very
But it
fun.
was Joey, not Johnny.
It was Joey.
I love to see the passion.
Yes.
You see it on stage when he's singing.
You
And then
do.
you see him talking, and you're like, where did it go?
Yeah, wake up.
Some people are like that, though, for sure.
I guess.
Like, they leave it all on the stage, and they don't have much left.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's almost dull off stage, which is crazy.
But I also feel like it's part of the persona.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe? I don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe.
So going ahead a couple years, right? This is, I think I'm skipping ahead a few years now, but it has to be told because it's about the Clash. It's about our favorite band. So this is 1979. The Clash are playing a run of shows in New York City. They're hanging out at Max's. They're trying to like get the vibe, and like they've always been appreciative of New York punk, right? They
Yes.
loved Richard Hell in particular, right? Who was in
Yes.
Television, and he was in the Heartbreakers. And Richard Hell is, we mentioned this, but he's sort of credited with like creating the style that became British punk.
Yeah, Richard Hell is going to be a really fun episode, and
Yeah.
Malcolm McLaren is going to be a
Yes.
really fun episode, the designer. But yes.
So Richard Hell and the Clash are hanging out in the back room at Max's. Richard Hell is like, for some reason, feeling confrontational, and he starts to like try to have a poetry slam with them, or like a rap battle, maybe.
I love it because the Clash did try to rap a little bit here and there.
Yeah, Joe definitely had a couple rap songs.
He had
This is,
some
I think this
bars.
might have been before. Was that this is Sandinista when he did that?
I
right?
think Sandinista is when he had the most like hip hop like tracks.
Yeah,
the
so-
Clash was messing around with sort of trying to spit bars and do some
Right,
hip hop
right.
songs on Sandinista. I don't know if this is before or after that,
know either.
but there is a point where, and in Big Audio Dynamite that Mick does
Right.
after the Clash, he definitely has a hip hop influence.
Right, absolutely. So
So-
this is Mick and Joe at Max's, and Richard Hell is kind of like coming at them with these bars.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it was just bars from Blank Generation.
That's fine.
Or he was doing like an unreleased thing. But he sort of challenges Joe Strummer to like rap battle with him.
Yeah.
And, Joe Strummer is like a notoriously pretty great lyricist.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of political views, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was known for just riding the bus around and writing
Yeah.
all these lyrics out.
Yeah.
So he's got bars in his head, no problem.
Yeah.
So they're like going back and forth for a while, and I just thought that was such like a fun, like just in the back room at Max's Kansas City, you just walk in and now you get to see Richard Hell and Joe Strummer rap
Doing this
battling.
like live
Yeah,
performance,
it was,
like
so
poetry
cool.
slam.
I know, I really love that.
That's
story.
crazy.
Yeah.
To be a fly on the wall.
We would be dead.
Yeah, we would not
We wouldn't
survive this
survive it.
time.
Yeah.
We had talked about this, but we would just keep doing 1977. I mean, that's both of our favorite year.
Just a constant loop.
Somebody else that was a busser at Max's before their era, before the punk era, who would play there later, was David Johansen of the New York Dolls. So
Oh, no way.
the New York Dolls were one of the first punk bands for that second era of like when it became punk. David Johansen, at the same time as Jonathan Richman, they were both busboys.
We have to write a TV show about
We
this.
have to. Yeah. It's going to
love
be
that.
very good. So we name dropped a lot of people in this episode. I have a list of like about 100 people, and I have another list on my phone. Just a couple highlights, like to give you an idea. We have Betsy Wilson, who's I would love to do an
She's a
episode on.
photographer? Or no, she's a
Fashion designer.
She was the one who was shooting amphetamines into her ass, apparently.
Yes, yeah, and she dated one of the Velvets and designed like suits for them.
That's
and
right. We
stuff.
talked about her before.
So I feel
yeah.
like she could totally. She's a punk designer before Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood. So I would love to do an episode on her. We have the Stones. We have Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. We have the Beatles. We have Yoko Ono.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Doors earlier on in the Patti Smith dates.
Springsteen and Aerosmith were both signed at Max's.
Oh, really? They were
Both of their,
signed
like,
there.
record contracts were
Hendrix
signed
is
there.
going to be there. We talked about Burroughs, Ginsburg, James Baldwin
I thought you
frequented
were gonna
there.
say James Bond. I was like, hell yeah.
He would.
He would have
have
been there. Yeah, he would have
Yeah,
been there.
that would have been like the Bond girls would have been in the back row.
Oh,
That's
for
probably where he
sure.
met them.
Exactly.
Yeah. The Kennedys, and then this drag queen that was jokingly referred to as Sugar Plum Fairy, which is
Oh.
famously in Lou Reed's solo
yeah,
song "Take a Walk on the Wild Side" gets a Sugar Plum
I
Fairy.
forgot that was a real person.
Yeah, because we talked a lot about all these people that were like famous at the factory that Lou Reed in our Lou Reed and Velvet Underground episode. We talked about how he sang about these transgender women from the factory, but this was one of the more famous songs he's done, and this is talking about transgender women from Max's.
I love that.
So Max's has a character in the Lou Reed solo career.
I mean, probably more than one. That we
I'm
just
sure
don't-
more.
yeah.
This is the only one I came
that you
across.
Can, right, exactly.
But yeah, we had everybody. We had like Faye Dunaway, Al Pacino.
Mm-hmm.
That's so crazy that you could go be in the same room as like Richard Hell and Al Pacino at the same time. That's
amazing.
crazy.
It's amazing.
Everyone.
I can't
everyone.
even imagine what it was like to be there.
I might just put up on our Instagram just a list of all the name dropping I
Okay.
found. I'll just type out this fucking 200 names, and you're gonna know 150 of these names off the top of your head.
It's that amazing.
I could just sit here for another 5 minutes name dropping. It's so crazy.
It really is crazy.
I don't know a place like that today. I mean, unless we're just not rich
I mean,
and
the only
famous.
place that had been like that before was Studio. Wait, was this before Studio 54?
This was overlapping,
Simultaneously.
but like it lived on beyond. So Studio
Yeah.
54 started, and then Andy Warhol lived across the street and would go over there. And then Studio 54 closed as Max's lived on. So
Okay.
there was a little bit of an overlap.
But it kind of carried that tradition on of all these people mixing together.
Yeah, the party scene.
Yeah.
But it was much more punk. Studio 54 was much more like glam and I
Right.
think just sort of colorful and
Right.
glittery.
It was more 60s and Max's
Yeah.
more 70s.
And
yeah.
Max's was punk as fuck. I mean, by 71, especially by 75. And then it closed in 81. Do you know the last show?
1981. No, I don't.
Bad Brains opened and the Beastie Boys headlined.
fuck up,
the
dude.
last show at Max's, the
What
Beastie
a
Boys
good
headlined.
show, though.
And like people don't realize Beastie Boys should totally get an episode on this podcast because
They're
their
very
early
punk.
stuff
Yeah,
was super punk.
they were literally a punk band.
They were literally a punk
I don't know
band.
that they were
and
playing in 1981. Though.
yeah,
that's
in
crazy.
1981 they headlined the last show at Max's.
Beastie Boys are one of my probably top 20, maybe top 10 bands.
So good.
So good.
I got into them in probably 9th grade, and it was all I listened to for like 6 months.
Was it? So when I got into them, it was where they'd just come out with Hello Nasty,
Oh no,
but it had like Intergalactic Planetary on it.
the first CD I bought of theirs was Licensed to Ill.
Oh, so good.
And
though.
I listened to that for a month straight before
Such
I
a
bought anything
ridiculous
else.
album,
It's so
though.
ridiculous.
that song Paul Revere.
So fun. And Paul Revere is a crazy
fucked
song.
up.
Yeah.
But then
really
like,
fun.
But then I got it was the Ill Communication that has Sabotage on it.
Yes,
And
I
then
think
was
so.
like, then that's when they're being like punk. fucking
Yes,
rock.
yeah. They also have like very pretty songs. There's
They
some
do.
stuff.
Yeah,
There's,
they really
there's
do.
some stuff that's so unexpected from them.
know.
I can't wait to
They're
do an
very
episode on them.
talented.
So when we get to 1981, we'll do a Beastie Boys episode.
that.
But right now we're still at the end of the 60s.
I think that MCA from the Beastie Boys is one of my idols. Like,
Really?
I
Yeah.
have a soft spot for him here. His
Yeah.
raspy fucking voice.
Yeah. I
love
love a raspy
Yeah,
voice.
me too.
Yeah.
So the last show was Beastie Boys and Bad Brains. That's an amazing last show.
Yeah. That's the end of Max's Kansas City. It will never be replicated.
No.
Please, if you know how to time travel, please reach out to us.
Yeah. Like we should definitely be ahead of like using it to cure cancer, like things of that nature. Like we need to go back.
Yeah, sorry, we don't have a podcast about cancer. We have a podcast about punk rock.
And I think that we really should write a TV show about this because
We're going to.
Yeah. At least in our heads.
No. We're going to.
Okay, cool.
What we have to do is we have
Oh,
to
right, because we don't do
establish-
drugs anymore, so we can do
Yeah,
things.
we have a lot. We're super productive. Now that
right.
we don't do drugs, instead of talking about doing
So
stuff,
ironic.
we
Once
do
we
it.
quit doing Adderall, we became so productive.
So much more productive. Counterintuitive. But what we would have been doing tonight is meeting up at 8 o'clock. And then at 2 a.m. when we were drunk and had done a bunch of lines,
we should do a
we would have been like,
podcast.
we're doing an episode on this band. We're going to do an episode on our podcast that we would never start.
Never start it.
So what we're going to do is like once we get a little bit more in the routine of like the podcast and I understand a little bit more how much hours of research I'm putting in, we make a little money so somebody else can do the fucking editing. Then we'll
would
have
love
the
that for
free
you.
time to start working on our show. So we just need the podcast to take off enough that somebody else can film and edit for us and
Yeah.
stuff. And then with those hours I have every week, we can get
can
to work
open
on
a
this
music venue and write a
drama
TV
comedy
show.
that'll be
Yeah.
on HBO
I love it.
about drugs, sex, rock and roll, and art at Max's Kansas City. Yeah.
This has been the only podcast that matters.
Yes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And if you didn't like it,
Get your own fucking podcast.
get your own fucking podcast.
Because it's really fun.
And we highly recommend it.
Talk to your best friend. Be like, do you want to start a podcast?
Get sober, get a friend, and start a podcast. You won't regret it.